So today we're gathering in the kitchen, making my one time of year mincemeat. My family loves mincemeat pies. I don't particularly care for it, so everyone gathers around with a spoon during the process to taste it and tell me if I need a little more of this or a little more of that. But mincemeat is pretty simple to make. It's also very incredible, the things that go into it. And so my family said, yes, you've got to share your mincemeat recipe. So here we go. It's going to be a lengthy process in the kitchen. We're going to need to be stirring the pot quite a bit. So I like to have other things that I'm doing around in the kitchen, maybe other projects, either a cleaning project or other types of cooking, baking, while the mincemeat is simmering on the stove. So first of all, believe it or not, in my mincemeat recipe, we start off with green tomatoes. Green tomatoes of all things, really? Yes, so this is a perfect recipe for when you're cleaning out your garden towards the end of the year in the fall time. What do you do with all those green tomatoes that just aren't going to ripen? Here you've got a recipe. But a few years ago, we moved to Nevada. We do not grow a lot. We don't have a lot of a garden. And so although we do get tomatoes in the spring and they're working on a second season tomatoes, usually they're little ones and we're just glad they get red and we can eat them. Not a lot to count on for mincemeat. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do? So I turned to tomatillos. Tomatillos you can often find them in the Mexican section, where you'd find jalapenos, cactus, cilantro, those kind of things. The tomatillos I have replaced in my recipe for the green tomatoes using the tomatillos. They work well. So what you do is just peel off the skin, rinse them, and cut them up and put them in a pot. So I've already got some peeled and washed. So I'm just going to cut them up for the pot and putting them in quarters. And this is going to be the base of what I make the mincemeat out of, is the tomatillos and applesauce. The other thing, I've got some peeled apples, some Granny Smith. It doesn't matter what kind of apples you use. I've also got these apples here, and I'm especially looking at these. These happen to be Pink Ladies, one of my favorite, but they've got some spots. They've been in the fridge for a while, and people probably aren't going to want to grab this apple to go to eat. So I'm going to clean off, pare away those spots. These will be great in our mincemeat. I also want to show you this apple. I peeled it a little bit ago. That's not why it's brown though. It's got these bruises. And as I was peeling, my fingers were going in and denting this. This is perfect fruit for mincemeat. It's not rotten, it's not spoiled, it's just not the desired texture. It's been bruised, but it's perfect for mincemeat. So we're going to be putting that in the pot to cook like for applesauce with the tomatillos and the other apples. I also have some apples here that I am not going to put in the pot for mincemeat. I'm just going to coarsely chop them so that we have bits of fruit in the mincemeat, so we have some more texture besides just the smooth applesaucey tomatillo stuff. So I'm going to chop that just coarsely, and I'll set that aside to add later into the pot. We're also going to be adding some raisins. Sometimes I add more than this. I'm just going to add these today. I'm also going to use figs, and these are dried figs. I'm going to destem them, and then I will also chop them up here into small pieces, and I will add the dried figs later. This will be great because there's going to be a lot of moisture with the tomatoes and the apples, and these dried fruits are going to help suck up some of that moisture. Okay, and then I also use currants, and I don't buy currants very often. I'm going to use this entire box except for a few that I save out because I like to use currants for the eyes and nose of gingerbread men that I'll be making here as we get closer to the Christmas time. I'll be making gingerbread men, so I like to save out some currants for that because I don't buy them that often. Okay, and then other things that are going to go into the pot, I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes when we get the pot, after we get the pot on the stove and going. So I did notice there was kind of a yucky looking spot on this one. I don't want yucky. Yucky as in maybe a bad spot, maybe a rotten spot, so I want to cut that away. But just something that's marred, that's okay. Now, my daughter was asking me today, why don't you just use red tomatoes? Why do you have to use green tomatoes? And my thought is, I don't know for certain, but when fruit is less ripe, there's more pectin in it. And so a green tomato, before it turns red, would have more pectin in it, and that would help the mincemeat to set up, maybe to congeal better, to thicken. That's what pectin is used for, and so that's my thought on that. I don't know that I'm really accomplishing that with the tomatillos, because tomatillos are ripe when they're green, so who knows? But anyway, tomatillos work well in the mincemeat. If we have trouble with our mincemeat not being thick enough, we'll be cooking it down, so over that time it will thicken up. But if it's not thickening up to our liking, then we can add a little bit of tapioca if it isn't quite as thick as we want it to be. Okay, so now we're back. We've got the apples and tomatillos on the stove. Put them in a big pot, much bigger pot than really it looks like I need. But if there's any splattering, I want to keep it in the pot. I don't like it going all over my stove. I'm kind of picky that way in the kitchen. So I've got a big pot. I put a little water in it. I've got it covered, and it's on to boil, just like you would make applesauce. So we've got in the pot, and in the meantime, I've taken the rest of those apples and I just coarsely chopped them. They are going to break down as they cook, but I don't want them as smooth as applesauce. So I'm just adding those, and then the rest of those figs, I destemmed them, and I've got those chopped up. So we'll go ahead and add this to the bowl of things that I'm going to add later. Okay, as I said earlier, I'm going to save some of these currants. They're much smaller than raisins, so they make really good little eyes and nose for the gingerbread men. So I'm saving some of those out. I'll set those aside, put them in a sealed container later so they stay nice and soft. I'm going to take the rest of these currants and just add them to my pot, or to my bowl over here. And I have raisins. I'm going to add those. And then, this is where it gets very interesting. See, to mincemeat, you can add just about anything. And earlier during the year, we had some nectarines that we bit into them, and they were kind of, well, my family calls them pithy, not a very good texture, and the flavor wasn't very good either. So we started a bag in the refrigerator called for mincemeat, and this just happens, I remember it happened not that long ago, this just happens to be nectarines. They look pretty disgusting. We froze them. I had them sitting out overnight, so they're still cold, but they're very soft, very gushy, will do well for the mincemeat. So here's a package of the nectarines. We also have a package of pears. We bought a box of pears, and a lot of them were pretty yucky, so family added those. And then here's another mincemeat package. It looks to me like there are some peaches in here. So I don't know if I'm going to add all of this fruit, but I'm certainly going to add some of it. So let's start first with those nectarines. And I'm just going to open up. This is going to be kind of messy, but that's okay. I'm going to add this to my bowl. Whoops, not all that. I'd kind of like to just take off the skin, so I don't have a lot of skin. I took the outer paper off of the tomatillos, but not the skin. I do like to take the skin off my apples. The skin doesn't have to come off all the fruits, but I'm going to take it off some of it. So I'm just putting these nectarines. Now, I could chop these a little bit. In fact, I think I will before I just put them in here. Well, that one is going to break down pretty good. Well, I'm just going to break these with my fingers. They're already in there anyway. And then I think I'll put some of these on this pan here. Well, yeah. Now some of this is kind of hard to loosen. Now this isn't going to need to be chopped because it kind of got smushed up. So I'm just going to put it in there. I don't have to worry about getting all of this fruit. Don't have to worry about how pretty it's going to look. Everything's going to be a dark brown in the mincemeat. And you know, if some of the skin goes in there, that's going to be okay too. Okay. Oh, and here's a pear along in with this nectarine. Is that a pear? No, this was a kiwi, I'll bet. Let's see if this got seeds inside. Sure enough, it was a kiwi. One of those kiwis, way too soft for anybody to enjoy. It will be great in the mincemeat. Here's another kiwi. It's already pretty soft. And we're going to get some more. This looks like a peach rather than a nectarine, but I think it probably is a nectarine. This is one of the reasons you want to label everything that goes into the freezer because it's unrecognizable. Mostly when it comes out. Of course, this was labeled for mincemeat, so it didn't really matter what fruit. And now that one's still fairly frozen. But this fruit is so soft, it doesn't really need to be chopped up. It's going to be cooking down. And I'll want to get to my pears after a little while to add some of that different flavor in there. Plums. We've got plums in here. And one of the things that my daughter who's filming this, Anna, just mentioned, she said, Mom, when you do get bits of fruit in there, or fruit skin, it's really good because it does roll up and adds nice texture too. So the plums, hey, it's really pretty color too. So I'm going to go ahead, just kind of rip it up a little bit and add it. Not all of it, but some of it. Not afraid to add it. Yeah, plums. Beautiful color. Now, when you're adding your fruit, you can use fresh fruit. Lots of fresh fruit. Oh, if you're adding a plum, be careful. Because there is a pit in the center. So, but use all the fresh fruit that you have. That's great to add that. In my case, I didn't have a lot of fresh fruit that was, and you can use good quality top of the line, this is delicious fruit, but you don't have to use the very best stuff in the mincemeat. And it just so happened I had a lot of frozen fruit that, hey, I bought it and it just wasn't good for fresh eating. So that's why I'm using that. Don't be afraid to add canned fruit, fresh fruit, frozen fruit, whatever you have available. But this looks kind of weird. And my daughter was asking me, do you like to make mincemeat? I do. I love to make it because it's so unusual that you could take stuff like this and you just get creative putting in whatever you want to put in. Oh, there's looks like a big peach. This one, some of them just, as soon as we discovered this batch of peaches, they just went straight in without anybody sampling them to see if it was worthy. So I've got a big peach pit here. I'm just kind of breaking this up. But yes, I love to make mincemeat. I never know quite how it's going to turn out. And, but they all, gather around the pot with their spoons and, oh, this is so good. And so they like it. So I guess that's why I like it so much. I will try to put together a kind of a recipe guide for you to follow, but really this is just have fun, make a mess, do something kind of weird in the kitchen. I guess that's why the kids really wanted me to share this with you, because it's so unusual. And, they really like it too. So, but it is pretty unusual that you can do all this. Oh, now this looks like an apple. Sure enough. Now, one of the things with me using frozen fruit is I have a lot of moisture I'm adding. So I know I'm going to need to cook this a little longer. I don't want all that apple skin. There we go. So I know I'm going to have to cook this longer, where if you're using dried fruit or fresh fruit, you're not going to have to cook it as long. And then if you're adding canned fruit, you're not going to have to cook it as long as I am with the frozen fruit, but longer than with the fresh fruit. Okay, and see, these actually made it to wedges Might have even made it to the table and nobody took them up because after tasting one, that was enough. Sometimes fresh fruit doesn't have the right texture to really enjoy well. Sometimes it's lacking in flavor. And a lot of these too, I remember, were lacking in flavor. It just didn't taste real good. Sometimes we eat those things just because they are fiber, even if the flavor isn't super great. Sometimes we go ahead and pass it over, and knowing that it's going to produce mincemeat is another great option for not letting the fruit go to waste. We used to live where we had animals, and so they would get a lot of the fruit that wasn't any leftover fruit from the house, ended up in the farmyard. Okay, so this is mostly pears. I had pears earlier, and when the camera was off and I was doing this, Ada said, "What is that? It looks like banana." And I said, "Oh no, it's pear." And I did ask the family one time, how would banana be in this, be in mincemeat? And they looked at me and they said, "No, not banana." So think of fall fruits: peaches, pears, apples, plums. Those are all great things to have in there. Of course, raisins, currants, figs, dried apricots. You could certainly put those in here, or any kind of apricot. That's a little more summertime. Okay, this is looking good. And my fingers are freezing cold, so I'm going to stop for now. If I want to add more fruit, guess what? There's some more. There are some more bags of fruit. I'm going to wash my hands, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back again, and we're going to, let's see, I want to move these currants away because I want to make sure I save those. Something else I added a few years ago, just going through looking for fruit for mincemeat, and I happened to think of cranberries that I had in the freezer. Now, every year when cranberries are in season, I always buy them. I like to make fresh cranberry sauce, really good. And then I like to make sure that I get some put away in the freezer because I make cranberry muffins all year round. And so I like to keep those on hand. I added some frozen cranberries to the mincemeat, and the family said it was fabulous. So every year since then, I'm adding cranberries. I think this is my 6th year, 7th year adding cranberries. And I have these frozen. You can, of course, add fresh cranberries. Now, that is quite a few cranberries, but given how sweet all that fruit is and the tart of the cranberry, I think I'm going to want to add a few more cranberries. Luckily, I have some more in the freezer, so I will get those out as well. Now, just to tell you how crazy making mincemeat is, but how fun it is I also have some old jam in the freezer. Old jam, we're just not going through it as quickly as we did because it's not this year's jam. So it's kind of lost some flavor, but I'm going to even add that in here. So this is a berry jam. I got a lot of flavor. I am going to need to add some sugar, believe it or not, later to the mincemeat. Not a lot of sugar, but some sugar, or you can add honey. And I'm going to need to add that later, so there's a little bit of that right there with the berry jam. So that makes it really fun. And when my applesauce and tomatillos, when they're soft enough that I can go mash them down a little bit, then I will add this fruit for the next stage. Okay, so we're coming along here. Things are looking good. I'm going to mash up the tomatillos and apples a little bit. They've really cooked down. Lots of liquid in here, so after having the lid on for a while to cook those down, I'm going to be keeping it open. And I'm just carefully mashing these, kind of breaking them up a bit. I'll do this and then I will add the other ingredients. All right, so now we've got all the fruit in the pot and it's going to be cooking and breaking down, releasing the steam, so we're left with less moisture in the pot. And after a while, I will then be adding the spices and seasoning. I'm going to add a little salt to help boost up the flavor, cut a little bit of the sweet, but help boost the flavor as well. Cinnamon will be our main spice that we're using, followed by cloves. We'll use quite a bit of cloves. That is probably what gives it its really strong, unique flavor. And then we'll be using some allspice as well. For sweetener, you can use sugar. I also have some honey that's kind of sugared here. The bottom of this, I'm going to have to use some hot water on the outside of this pot to help release that honey, but you know, I don't use the sugared honey very often, so this will be perfect to melt it down in there. Also, recently we bought some carrot honey and it's really got a strong flavor. No one seems to really care for it on their toast, and so it will be perfect in the pot with the mincemeat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a lot of moisture in that pot, especially with the frozen fruit. So there's no worries though if my mincemeat turns out to be a little bit more runny than usual. So when I go to make a mincemeat pie, I will just sprinkle on a little of the minute tapioca on top of that top crust, just to kind of keep it from oozing out so much if, and that's only if, it seems to be a really runny batch of mincemeat. So that will help counteract that. Now, my family loves mincemeat pie. This mincemeat, because there's so much sugar in it too, so much sweetener in it, it can last in the refrigerator for several weeks. And so I can make pies during that time. If you have a canner and you've made a lot of mincemeat, you can can the mincemeat, and about a quart jar is what you'll need for a pie. And then I also have one of my daughters who prefers not to have it in pie, but just in a dish. So just a little dish of mincemeat, that makes her happy, just like having a bowl of applesauce. So we'll get on to the spices later, but for now we're just going to let that cook, and we're going to come back every so often and stir the bottom of the pot. We don't want it to scorch. I know that for a fact because I've done that before too. So we'll just go on about our business while it does its magic in the pot. So the mincemeat has been cooking for about 4 hours. You can see it's cooked down quite a bit. We're not seeing all the different colors. It's really taken on the look more of mincemeat. Now I'm going to add the cinnamon. Cinnamon is what we're going to have most of in here. I'm going to add, oh, I don't know, about 4 tablespoons. Remember, I did say that I would get you the recipe or something of a recipe. Next is cloves. Cloves is a very distinguished flavor in the mincemeat. And now we're going to have some allspice, not quite so much of that though. And going to put in a little bit of salt just to kind of help the flavor. And we had that honey we were putting in, and I will add this honey. I've got some other honey. Remember that carrot honey that I thought I was going to put in? Well, it was on the counter waiting to go in, and someone came in, one of my sons. It was lunchtime, and he said, "Oh, I love carrot honey." And another son came in and echoed those same words. So, okay, so we didn't put it in the mincemeat. We saved it for carrot honey to add to their toast, put on their toast or their biscuits, whatever. They just need to remember to have it. Okay, now I'm guessing, just kind of guessing, that I'm going to need more spices in there, but I also know I'm going to need more honey. So we're going to add this. Probably a little bit more. Now we're going to stir this around. And I am almost ready for a taste tester. So Anna is here in the room with me. She's doing the recording. probably ask her to get a spoon and start the taste testing. Okay, so Anna wasn't sure. She made someone else do some testing also. They kind of thought more cinnamon, so we'll add a little bit more cinnamon, a little bit more cloves. And they both said, oh, it needs more sweetener. So we're going to add some more honey. Enough that they both said more honey. Okay, so I've got everyone pretty satisfied with the flavor of the mincemeat. And so now I'm just going to let it sit here for a little longer, just simmer with those spices. And after that, if you're going to can it, you can load up your jars and run the canner. If you're going to make a pie, you can certainly put this in it. I'm not going to make a pie today, but I will put this away in the refrigerator so that I can add it to a pie later. But that's pretty much it. You can still see a little bit of color in there. You've got nice texture, not completely applesaucey. You can see seeds in there. Oh, see, there's a little piece of skin too. So it's got plenty of texture in here. They like the flavor, the sweetness, everything. And I'm just going to let it simmer here for a little while longer just to let the seasonings blend. But our mincemeat is ready. We've done a good job.